She walked into the upscale boutique, like any other customer, until the silent alarm was triggered. Within minutes, 4 officers tackled her to the ground, accusing her of stealing a scarf she hadn't touched. The manager smiled, whispering, "You people never learn." Her son recorded everything, but when they tried to release the footage, the media refused to air it. Then, a hidden voice from inside the store leaked something no one was supposed to hear. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The wind cut through the Chicago morning, like it had something to prove. Icy, relentless, and unapologetic, it whipped down 51st Street, stirring loose newspaper pages, and bending bare trees into shivering silhouettes. Rebecca Langford pulled her designer coat tighter around her shoulders. As her heels clicked against the sidewalk, the steam from a nearby manhole curled around her like breath from a sleeping giant. But her steps remained steady, practiced, distant. She was used to these walks. Every Friday, she passed this same stretch of Southside pavement on her way to the Langford Community Renewal Center, the nonprofit she'd inherited, along with the guilt, from her mother's side of the family, a place she'd worked hard to turn into a safe space for inner-city youth. At least that's what the brochure said. But today, something different interrupted the normal Friday rhythm. A sound, thin at first, almost brittle, then bold, rising like steam against the cold. A violin. Not a perfect, trained sound, but emotional, raw. A little uneven but more powerful for it, like a voice cracking from trying too hard not to break. It laced through the early morning air with urgency, wrapping around Rebecca's chest before she had time to name the feeling. She stopped walking. The melody, haunting and familiar, seemed to carve its way through her like a whisper from the past. She turned toward the sound, following it like it was calling her by name. On the far end of the block, near a trash bin behind a bakery, she saw him, a black teenager, no older than 15, standing with a cheap violin cradled to his neck. He wore a threadbare hoodie and jeans too thin for the season. His sneakers were duct-taped at the sides. He played with his eyes closed, as if the music was more real than anything around him. Around him, people passed without pausing. They walked faster, some switching sides of the street, others casting brief, annoyed glances before disappearing into warm cafes or onto city buses. Rebecca didn't move. She couldn't. Something in the way he moved the bow, tentative but deliberate, was tearing at the edges of her memory. She knew that song. But that couldn't be. She hadn't heard it in over 20 years. Back then it had been coming from a cracked tape deck in a dim living room, played by a man who only existed now in photographs and ghosts. Her father, Johnny Lang, a white jazz musician who disappeared from her life when she was 10. One day he was there, humming strange lullabies while tapping on countertops with drumsticks. The next, gone. No note, no funeral, just silence. The song being played now was the same one she had found on the old cassette tucked away in the attic last year, the only proof her father had once written music. The boy's bow slowed as the final note lingered in the air, like a held breath. Then silence, complete. She took a cautious step forward, but before she could speak, the bakery's door slammed open. "Hey." A portly white man in an apron stormed outside, holding a broom. "You again?" The boy lowered his violin and stared blankly at the man. "I told you, no loitering. This ain't no concert hall, and we don't need your type scaring off customers." Rebecca's eyes widened. "Excuse me?" she said, stepping between them. "He's not bothering anyone." The man blinked, registering her expensive coat, polished boots, and the decisive authority in her voice. "Oh, I didn't see you there, ma'am. Thought maybe he was harassing folks. You know how it is down here," the man said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Glad to see someone like you out here helping, just trying to keep things in order." She wanted to say something, anything, but her focus was already back on the boy. He was quietly packing the violin into a soft, torn case, his expression unreadable. "Hey," she said gently. "What's your name?" He looked at her like he was trying to determine what game she was playing. His eyes, sharp and full of old defiance, met her. "Zion," he said flatly. Then he turned and walked. She hesitated, then followed. "Zion, wait, that song you played, where did you learn it?" He didn't break stride, just turned his head slightly and muttered, "Found the violin in a box." She kept following, heart racing. That song my father used to play that. He wrote it. I have the original recording. Zion stopped. Slowly, he turned around and looked at her like she just started speaking in tongues. You said your father wrote that? His voice was low, almost skeptical. Yes, his name was Johnny Lang. Zion stared for a moment longer, then without another word, turned and slipped into a side alley between buildings. Wait, Zion! She chased him around the corner, but he was gone. The alley was empty. Just trash cans and broken concrete. No doors. No sounds. Gone. Rebecca stood there, breathing hard. The violin's melody still echoing in her ears. Later that night, after hours of work emails she couldn't focus on, and a dinner she couldn't finish, she found herself digging through the old cedar chest at the foot of her bed.
The tape!
She dusted off the old cassette player and clicked it in. Static. Then the sound began. Soft, raw, imperfect, and achingly familiar. The exact same tune, note for note, played by a man who vanished 20 years ago. And now, played again by a boy named Zion. Her hands trembled. Tears welled up unexpectedly. She hit rewind, then play again. The same tune. She wasn't imagining it. She sat frozen for a long moment, then pulled out her laptop and began typing. She searched his name, then keywords. Zion Violin, Chicago. Nothing. She searched homeless shelters, juvenile centers, runaways. Nothing. But somewhere out there in the cold, in an alley, a boy was playing her father's lost music. It wasn't possible. It wasn't explainable. Unless he wasn't just some street kid. Rebecca's hand hovered over the cassette player as a strange thought formed. What if this boy was family? The next morning, the cold was sharper. Rebecca didn't sleep. His melody haunted her, more than ever. She sat at her kitchen table, nursing the same cup of coffee for hours, her laptop open, tabs scattered across the screen, shelter directories, missing youth databases, Southside community reports, no trace of him, no record, nothing under the name Zion. She left her apartment by noon, bundled in wool, hair pulled back tight like armor. Her first stop was the nearest youth shelter, a modest red brick building, with a hand-painted sign that read New Beginnings. Inside, the warmth was immediate. Staff smiled at her, familiar with her nonprofit work. The director, a white woman in her late 50s, clasped Rebecca's hand. Always good to see a Langford walking through our doors. They offered her tea, brought her into the office. It was all pleasant, until she described Zion. Black teen, she said carefully. Probably 15 or 16. About 5'8". Skinny, wears a gray hoodie, plays violin. The air changed. Just slightly. The director's smile faltered. Oh, she said. That one. Rebecca frowned. You've seen him? Well, not in here. No, the woman said. He hangs around sometimes. Won't come inside. Doesn't trust anyone. Honestly, we've had problems with that type before. Rebecca's brows pulled together. What type? You know, damaged kids. Aggressive. Distrustful. Doesn't follow rules. He plays that violin for hours on the curb, like the world owes him a stage. There it was. Polite racism dressed in social work. Rebecca set her tea down. Music might be the only thing keeping him sane. The woman shrugged. He's a wanderer. Not the kind you can help. Outside, a janitor sweeping salt from the walkway caught her attention. Heard you asking about the violin kid, he said quietly as she passed. Rebecca paused. Do you know where he goes? He sleeps near the art center downtown, behind the old fountain. Security don't like him much. That night, Rebecca drove down South Wabash Avenue, heart pacing like it had somewhere to be before she did. The art center loomed in the distance. Glass walls, white pillars, banners fluttering from tall steel beams, announcing an upcoming exhibit on voices of urban youth. The irony burned. The courtyard was mostly empty, except for a few art students huddled under scarves and vape clouds. Then she saw him. Zion sat cross-legged on the edge of the dry fountain, violin case open, bow in hand. He wasn't playing, just staring into nothing, like the day had taken something from him, and refused to give it back. She wasn't the only one who noticed him. From inside the center, a young mother in a beige trench coat stepped out with her child, holding his hand tightly. Her eyes flicked to Zion. He was just sitting, still, quiet. But then the child looked at him, and smiled. The mother pulled her son closer, and whispered something to the security guard near the doors. The guard, a thick white man with a shaved head and earpiece, stepped toward the fountain with a familiar aggression. "Hey, you again?" Zion blinked up. "I told you before you can't be here. You're making people uncomfortable." Zion stood slowly. "I didn't say nothing. I was just sitting." "You looked at that child too long." Rebecca's breath caught. She stepped forward. "He was just sitting here," she said, voice steady but firm. "You're harassing him." The guard turned. "Ma'am, this doesn't concern you." "I think it does." The mother behind the guard narrowed her eyes. "You should be careful involving yourself in this kind of behavior. You don't know who he is." Zion said nothing. His eyes had turned dull again, like shutters slamming closed. "Come with me," Rebecca said, ignoring the stares. "Please." Zion hesitated, then followed. They walked in silence until they reached her car parked half a block down. "I can take you somewhere warm," she offered, "just for a meal. No expectations. I don't go in cars." "Okay, we'll walk." They ended up in a 24-hour diner, tucked in a corner booth near the back. The waitress, a black woman in her 30s, gave Zion a once-over, then looked at Rebecca with wary suspicion. "You good?" Rebecca nodded. "He's with me." After the waitress left, silence filled the booth. Rebecca didn't press. Let him eat first. He devoured pancakes and eggs like he hadn't seen food in days. Maybe he hadn't. When the plate was empty, Zion leaned back, eyes drifting to the window. "You rich or something?" he finally asked. Rebecca smirked. "Something like that." "Why you care about some kid playing music on a corner?" "Because you played something impossible. Something only my father ever played." He stared at her for a beat. "That song," she continued, "it's his. It's the only one I ever heard him play. He vanished when I was 10. I thought the song vanished with him." Zion looked down. "I didn't write it," he said. "Didn't even know it was special." Rebecca's pulse quickened. "Then where did you learn it?" "I didn't. I found it." He reached into his backpack and pulled out a folded piece of sheet music, wrinkled, water-stained, but still legible. "And a photo." A faded, yellowing Polaroid. He slid it across the table. Rebecca's hand trembled as she picked it up. It was a picture of a man, white, slim, late 30s, holding a violin. Her father, standing next to a black woman, tall, radiant, with soft curls and a wide smile and a baby in her arms. Rebecca's breath caught in her throat. She'd never seen that photo before. "Where did you get this?" she whispered. Zion looked out the window. "Found it in an abandoned building last year, in a violin case, buried under some floorboards. Music, letters, photo. It was like somebody left it there and never came back." Her voice was barely audible. "Why didn't you throw it away?" He shrugged. "I liked the song, felt like something I knew even before I knew it." Rebecca stared at the photo again, her world narrowing to the grainy image of her father. Everything around her dissolved. The diner noise, the cold outside, the ache in her head. He wasn't just a boy on the street. He wasn't just a mystery. There was a reason their paths crossed. Zion's voice broke through her thoughts.
"You think he's your dad?"
She looked up slowly. "I know he is." Zion leaned in, his voice low and steady. "Then you're gonna want to know what else was in that case." Rebecca didn't speak for nearly a full minute. She just stared, eyes locked on the worn edges of the photo, tracing every faded line of her father's face. There was no mistaking it. The dimple in his right cheek, the lopsided smile, the narrow bridge of his nose. It was Johnny Lang. But the woman beside him wasn't her mother, and the baby in her arms, swaddled and half asleep, didn't belong to the life she remembered. She turned the photo over with shaking fingers. There, scrawled in faint blue ink, "Club M, 2008. Her breath caught in her throat. "Family." The word looked foreign now, too loose and too sharp all at once. Zion sipped from his glass of water, not looking at her. Rebecca finally whispered, "I don't understand." Zion's voice was low, almost cold. "You don't gotta." He never told us about this. About her. She stopped, pressing the photo to her chest like it might anchor her to something real. "About you." Zion raised an eyebrow. "He told you about me?" She looked away. "No. That's what I mean." A long silence stretched between them like fog rolling in. Then Zion leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "So what now? You want to fix me? Get me a scholarship? Put me in some program so you can feel better about your daddy?" Rebecca met his gaze, wounded but steady. No. I want to know the truth. That's all. He sat back, folding his arms. People like you don't want truth. You want clean stories. That hurt. But it wasn't untrue. Back in her condo that night, the photo haunted her. She placed it beside the tape recorder, staring at the two artifacts like puzzle pieces that didn't belong together but somehow fit. She didn't sleep. She couldn't. By morning, she was driving to Oak Park, back to the house where her mother still lived. Prime, orderly, and wrapped in silence like shrink wrap over something dead. Her mother, Margaret Langford, opened the door with tired eyes. She was still in her robe, hair in rollers, clutching a mug of herbal tea. "Rebecca," she said, surprised but not welcoming. "It's early." Rebecca stepped inside without waiting. She went straight to the dining room and placed the photo on the glass table. Her mother's expression didn't change, but the color drained from her face. "Do you know what this is?" Rebecca asked. Margaret didn't answer. "It's him, Dad, with another woman, and a child. Still nothing. Just the faint sound of a grandfather clock ticking in the corner." "Who is she?" Margaret finally sat down, slowly, as though her legs had aged 10 years in 10 seconds. "That was a mistake," she said. Rebecca flinched. "A mistake?" Her mother looked out the window. He was unwell toward the end. Confused. Restless. He got caught up in places he didn't belong. Rebecca's fists clenched. He belonged to her. Margaret's jaw tightened. She was trouble, Rebecca. The kind that turns men into shadows. That child. He was holding his child. Margaret's eyes flashed. "That wasn't our concern. It wasn't your concern. It is now." Silence. Finally, her mother stood, smoothing her robe like it could iron out the wrinkles in the conversation. "You're not black, Rebecca. This isn't your burden to carry. Let the past be the past." Rebecca shook her head. "You knew. All these years. And you said nothing." "I was protecting you." "No. You were protecting yourself. From embarrassment. From scandal." Margaret didn't deny it. When Rebecca left, the air outside felt colder than it had yesterday, and somehow heavier. Back at the center, she tried to focus. Emails. Scheduling. Donor calls. But her fingers hovered over the keyboard like they'd forgotten the alphabet. Everything looked different now. She called a few of her friends, white women from her law school days, most of them involved in nonprofits or advocacy. But when she brought up the photo, their reactions chilled her. "Maybe don't insert yourself too deep," one said. "You could come off like a white savior." "Why does it matter now?" another added. "You can't change what happened." A third laughed lightly. "So you're related to a homeless violinist. Maybe it's a good PR angle." Rebecca hung up. She sat in her office alone, the photo clutched in her lap. Zion wasn't wrong. People did love their clean stories, especially people like her. When she met with him again later that evening, this time at a different cafe, one less sterile, more lived in, he was sitting in the back corner, hood up, fingers drumming on the table. "You came back," he said, not looking up. "I said I would." He studied her for a long moment. "So, you believe it now?" She nodded. "I saw my mother. She knew. She buried it." Zion snorted. "Of course she did. That's what they do." Rebecca flinched. "Who?" "People who look like you." He said it without anger. "Just fact." "I want to help," she said quietly. "Don't." "What?" "Don't make this about you helping. Don't come in here thinking this is some redemption arc." "I'm not," she whispered. "You are." The words stung because they were honest. Not cruel. Just true. She reached into her bag and pulled out a notepad. There was an address on the back of the photo. Club M. "You know it?" Zion shrugged. "Never heard of it. I checked city archives. It used to be a jazz club on South Pulaski, demolished 6 years ago." "Then what's the point?" She leaned forward. "Because it's where that photo was taken. Maybe someone remembers something." Zion looked skeptical, but something flickered in his eyes. "Don't need your pity," he muttered. "I'm not offering pity. I'm offering presence." That stopped him. He looked at her for a long time. Then he slid something else across the table. Another photo. This one newer. A crumpled Polaroid of the same baby. Just closer. Eyes closed. Small fists clenched. Swaddled in the same blanket. He whispered, "That baby was me." Rebecca stared at the photo in shock, her pulse pounding. If Zion was the baby, what happened to the woman in the photo? The address on the back of the photo led them to an empty lot framed by rusted chain-link fencing and a crumbling brick foundation, swallowed slowly by weeds and time. It was nothing like the vibrant place the photo hinted at. No velvet curtains, no trumpet flare from dimly lit corners, no heartbeat of music pulsing from the walls. Just silence, and dust, and ghosts. Zion kicked at a pile of old plaster where the door might have once been. So this is it? The place from the picture? Rebecca nodded, clutching the photo in her coat pocket like it might answer questions faster if she held it tighter. It was called Club Mosaic, she said. Opened in the 80s. Closed in 2009. The city tore it down for a new development that never came. Zion glanced around. Looks like nobody even remembers it existed. She shook her head. Maybe not with their eyes. But memories don't vanish that easy. They wandered the edge of the lot. Around them, the neighborhood breathed carefully. Low-income housing on one end, pawn shops and liquor stores on the other, and tucked between them, an old corner store, with dusty windows and a hand-painted sign, Ernie's Martin Moore. Inside, time had stopped. Yellowed calendars from 2012, faded cereal boxes, and a frail black man hunched behind the counter reading a paperback with a broken spine. Rebecca approached carefully. "Excuse me, do you remember Club Mosaic?" The man didn't look up. "You cops?" "No," she said quickly. "We're looking for someone. Johnny Lang." That got his attention. The man slowly looked up, eyes narrowing. "White Cat," he said finally. "Jazz man." Played like his fingers were on fire. Zion's head snapped toward him. "You knew him?"
Knew of him.
"You don't forget someone like Johnny. Especially not around here." Rebecca leaned in. "Do you remember what happened to him?" The man set down his book and sighed, the sound carrying years of weight. "He got too close. To who? To a woman he loved, and a community that didn't trust the color of his skin." Rebecca swallowed. "Do you know her name?" The man nodded slowly. "Celeste." Zion froze. The name sat heavy in the air. "She sang here," the man added. "Every weekend, had a voice that could stop fights before they started." Rebecca's voice trembled. "Do you know where we can find her?" The man reached for a notebook behind the register, tore a page, and scribbled something. "She's in a place called Morning Pines. It's a nursing home. On the west side." He handed it to her, then looked at Zion. "You got his eyes, boy." And his stillness. They left the store in silence. By afternoon they were pulling up outside a squat brick building, framed by leafless trees and chain-linked sadness. Morning Pines smelled like antiseptic and old paper, with nurses in pastel scrubs pushing wheelchairs down hallways too quiet for life. Room 2. Celeste Harper. She was propped up in bed, gray hair wrapped in a silk scarf, eyes closed as if dreaming through static. Zion hesitated in the doorway. Rebecca nudged him forward. "Miss Harper," Rebecca said gently. The woman opened one eye, then the other. When she saw Rebecca, her face pinched. "You're from the papers?" "No," she said. "I'm his daughter."
Celeste's breath caught. "Johnny's?"
Rebecca nodded. Celeste's gaze shifted to Zion. Her lips tightened. "And you brought him?" Zion flinched. "I didn't ask to come. I don't talk to Johnny's people," Celeste said coldly. "Not anymore. Not after what they did." Rebecca stepped forward. "We just want to understand what happened. Please." Celeste shook her head. "Understanding won't undo what's been done." Zion turned to leave. Then, like a reflex, he pulled the violin from his backpack. He didn't speak. He didn't ask. He just played the same song that had drawn Rebecca to him in the first place. That mournful, lonely, raw melody, the one that didn't belong to time or place but memory and loss. Celeste's eyes welled. She whispered, "That was his soul song." Zion stopped playing. Celeste didn't speak for a long while. Then her voice cracked. "They said he left us," she said. "Said he ran. But he didn't." Rebecca moved closer. "Then what happened?" Celeste looked straight at her. "He was taken." Rebecca felt her stomach twist. "Taken?" Celeste nodded slowly. "He started getting threats when we went public, from both sides. White folks didn't want him playing in our clubs. Black folks didn't want him dating outside the race. Said he was corrupting the neighborhood. A white man with a black woman and a child. That was gasoline on a fire." Zion sat slowly. "We plan to leave," Celeste whispered. "To disappear. Start fresh. He packed that night. Said he'd meet me at the bus depot. But he never came." Rebecca leaned forward. Did you call the police? Celeste laughed bitterly. I was black. He was white but poor and in the wrong neighborhood. They said he probably changed his mind. That maybe he found a wider path. Her hands trembled in her lap. But I know better. Rebecca's voice was soft. What do you mean? I found his violin case at the bus station the next day, unopened, with our ticket stubs still inside. Zion looked down. Somebody didn't want him to leave with us, Celeste said. Rebecca felt something cold crawl up her spine. You think someone killed him? Celeste shook her head. I think someone made sure he stopped existing. Zion whispered. But why? Celeste's eyes darkened. Because love that crosses color lines still scares this country more than any riot. She turned to Zion. And you, boy, you play like him. I found the violin in a burned house, Zion said quietly. Along with the music. Celeste nodded. He must have hidden it. For you. Rebecca's heart thudded. Do you know anyone who might have known more? Celeste's voice dropped to a whisper. There was one man, used to work security at the club. Close with the police. He didn't like Johnny. Didn't like us together. I heard he still lives nearby. His name? Briggs. Carl Briggs. Rebecca wrote it down quickly. Thank you, she said. Celeste's eyes grew misty. Don't thank me. Just don't let them bury him again. As they left, Zion stopped Rebecca outside the door. That man, Briggs. I've heard that name before. They sat in the car in silence for nearly 10 minutes, the heater humming low and uneven. Outside, the nursing home's windows glowed yellow in the dusk, soft and warm against the early winter dark. But inside the vehicle, the air was thick, uneasy, electric. Zion stared through the windshield, his breath fogging up the glass. I've heard that name, he said again, voice low. Briggs. Rebecca turned toward him. Where? I don't know. His fingers twitched against his thigh. Maybe from someone I stayed with. Or maybe from when I was little. It just stuck. She started the car and drove without speaking. The streets blurred, traffic lights glowing like slow blinks through her windshield. Her hands were tight around the steering wheel, her thoughts tighter still. Back at her apartment, she pored over public records like a woman possessed. Johnny Lang, born 19, licensed musician. No death certificate. No missing person report. No criminal charges. No property transfer since.
No legal existence, just gone.
It didn't make sense. People didn't vanish like that. Not unless someone helped them disappear. The next morning she shared the findings with Zion, in a small cafe near Lincoln Park. No death record, he asked, brows drawn low. But everyone told me he died before I was born. Who told you? He looked away. Foster folks. Cass workers. I asked once when I was like 10. Got told your daddy's dead, move on. He paused. One guy told me he died in jail. Another said he walked out on us and OD'd. And your mom? Died in 2010. No answers. Just a name on a form. Rebecca's voice cracked. They buried the truth under their own assumptions. No, Zion said sharply. They chose not to ask questions. 'Cause I was a black kid with no paperwork and a white-sounding daddy. Nobody wanted that mess. Rebecca opened her mouth, then closed it. He was right. At the Langford Center that afternoon, she found the atmosphere colder than usual. Colleagues who usually greeted her with warm nods now offered distant glances. Her assistant, Jamie, handed her a file wordlessly and avoided eye contact. Something was off. Her office felt too clean. On the desk sat an envelope with her name, nothing else. She opened it. Inside, a letterhead from the board. Subject: Professional Conduct Review. The words bled into each other. Her investigation into Johnny Lang had created reputational concerns. Her use of center resources for non-sanctioned personal investigations was being reviewed. Until further notice, her decisions required board oversight. She blinked. The irony was bitter. Her own organization, built to restore dignity to the invisible, was trying to render her invisible. That night, her phone buzzed. A text from the board chair. I suggest you stop digging. This isn't your story to fix. She didn't respond. Instead, she opened her laptop again and typed into a legal search engine. Carl Briggs, Chicago PD. One match. Detective Carl Briggs. Retired 2009. Suspended pending investigation into racial misconduct. Internal records sealed. Zion, sitting across from her in the apartment, leaned over. That's him? She nodded. He read the note twice. Why would he come after your dad? Because Johnny loved someone the system said he wasn't allowed to love. Zion exhaled slowly. So what now? You get him arrested? Rebecca shook her head. Not without proof. Not after all this time. A silence settled again. Then Rebecca's office phone rang. She ignored it. It rang again. And again. She finally picked it up. No voice. Just breathing. Then a whisper. You want answers? Come alone. 10 p.m. Corner of 43rd and Calumet. Bring no one. The line went dead. She stared at the phone. Zion sat forward. Who was it? She didn't answer at first. Then quietly. Someone who knows more than they should. Zion's eyes sharpened. You're not going, right? Not alone. I have to. You don't even know if it's real. What if it is? He stood. Then you take me. Rebecca shook her head. They said come alone. He laughed bitterly. And you're gonna listen to the people who covered this up? She didn't respond. He paced, eyes wide with something she couldn't name. I swear if you walk into some setup, I'm not afraid, she said softly. Well, I am, Zion shot back. I just found out my whole damn life was a lie. You think I'm ready to lose the only person asking the right questions? The words hung there, unspoken but heavy. She looked at him. You won't lose me. That night, as the clock neared 10 p.m., Rebecca stood at the shadowed corner of 43rd and Calumet, alone, when headlights flashed once, then twice, and a figure stepped out of the dark. The wind felt different on 43rd and Calumet. Not colder, not stronger, just heavier, like it carried something unsaid between its gusts, something buried and breathing beneath the pavement. Rebecca stood beneath a flickering street lamp, hands deep in her coat pockets, the night pulsing around her. Traffic had thinned to occasional echoes, the streets breathing with soft whispers of the forgotten. It was 9:58. She checked her watch. Again. Then again. No one. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. A siren wailed further off. Then headlights. They blinked once. Then twice. A rusted sedan pulled up half a block down, its engine sputtering like it hadn't been driven in weeks. The passenger door creaked open, but no one stepped out. Rebecca hesitated. Her feet wanted to move backwards. Then a figure emerged. Tall, hunched slightly, face obscured beneath a hoodie, shadowed by the poor lighting. Not threatening, not timid, just unreadable. He approached slowly, hands visible, holding something small and square in his palm. Langford? He asked, voice low and strained. Rebecca nodded cautiously. He extended his hand. In it, a cassette tape. No label, just black plastic and age. What is this? The man looked around, as if the bricks might start listening. Proof, he whispered, but not the kind that fits in court. Who are you? He ignored the question. He played too loud for his skin color. The man said, voice trembling slightly. Made too many people uncomfortable. Both sighed. Rebecca's pulse quickened. Johnny Lang? The man nodded. He wasn't supposed to belong. Who hurt him? She asked. The man took a step back, his silhouette melting into the shadow like a habit. I said too much already, he murmured. That tape? It's the part they didn't burn. Rebecca took a step forward. Wait, please, what happened to him? He paused. They didn't kill him, he said, but they made sure the world thought he was dead. Then he turned, disappearing into the alley without another word. Rebecca chased after him, boots echoing on wet concrete. But when she turned the corner, nothing. Gone. Just the stench of old graffiti, a cracked bottle, and the silence of someone who didn't want to be remembered. She stood there, tape in hand, unsure whether her fingers were trembling from cold or revelation. Back at her apartment, she stared at the cassette for 10 minutes before slipping it into the old player she kept for Johnny's tape. A crackle. Then static. Then Johnny's voice. Soft, uneven, recorded in a rush. If you're hearing this, I guess something went wrong. Or maybe it went right, and I'm just a ghost now. A pause. Rebecca's breath caught. I'm not running from my family. I'm running from the people who think I shouldn't have one. Another pause. The sound of a door creaking. Footsteps. The recording resumed. There's a boy, he's mine. He's perfect. And I won't be there when he starts asking why his skin's darker than the man in his photos. Or why his father got chased out of jazz clubs and neighborhoods where his music didn't belong. Rebecca blinked away tears. I kept playing after the threats started. Thought music could drown them out. Thought love could be louder. But the louder I got, the more they circled. A deep exhale. White folks told me I betrayed my blood. Black folks said I was trespassing. The cops told me I should pick a side before the streets pick for me.
Then a softer voice. Celeste, if you're hearing this, I'm sorry.
The tape hissed. I never wanted to leave. But I saw the way they watched you. Watched him. I saw the badge tucked beneath that man's coat when he followed me home.
A beat.
I think tonight they'll make me disappear. I won't fight. Not if it means they leave you both alone. Rebecca covered her mouth. Then, to my son, you'll probably grow up thinking, I didn't care. Or that I chose silence. But I didn't. I chose to love you louder than this world wanted to hear. The tape clicked. She rewound it. Played it again. Then again. By the time Zion arrived the next morning, she had played it over a dozen times. He entered quietly, his hoodie damp from rain, eyes bleary. She didn't speak. Just pressed play. He froze at the sound. His mouth opened, then closed. He listened. And when Johnny said my son, something inside Zion cracked audibly. That's him, he whispered. That's really him. Rebecca placed a hand on his shoulder. He didn't flinch, but his face was wet. They sat in silence until the recording finished. Zion looked at her. He knew they were going to take him, and he knew. She nodded. He left the tape. He wanted someone to remember. Zion's fingers traced the edge of the cassette. That man in the alley, he said suddenly. His voice? Rebecca turned to him. It's familiar, Zion whispered. Like something from when I was real little. Like a voice from behind a door I wasn't supposed to hear. Rebecca leaned in. Are you sure? I don't know. Maybe I'm making it up. But he didn't sound convinced. She looked back at the cassette. He said they didn't kill him, she murmured, but made the world believe he was gone. Zion stood, pacing. So where is he now? Rebecca looked down at the cassette again, because tucked in the case, now visible under the light, was a small folded slip of paper, with coordinates. The paper inside the cassette case was folded 4 times, stiff from years of being pressed flat and forgotten. Rebecca smoothed it carefully on her desk, her eyes scanning the faded ink. 42.2215. Property of J. Lang. Coordinates. Zion leaned in, eyes narrowing. That looks like Evanston. Rebecca nodded slowly. Near the lake, close to Northwestern's old storage district. But why would he stash anything out there? Before she could answer, another thought broke through, sharper than the rest. The voice. The man in the alley. They had his voice on tape, and that meant there might be a match. She looked up. There's a radio station I used to partner with. They have software stuff the police don't share publicly. Voice analysis tools. Within the hour, they were driving across town to an independent FM station, tucked in the back of a converted warehouse. Rebecca had done donor interviews here before. Deep dives on urban housing, youth incarceration, voter suppression. But today, her voice wouldn't be the one broadcast. They were met by Manny Cruz, a sound engineer in his 40s with a ponytail and wire-rimmed glasses. He greeted Rebecca with a hug, then turned to Zion. So this the violin kid? Zion half smiled. I guess I'm a lot of things now. Inside the booth, Manny slid the cassette into a converter and patched it into the system. The grainy recording of the alley conversation, filtered through street noise and distance, played softly through the speakers. Manny tapped away at his keyboard, isolating frequencies, clearing static. Give me a second, he muttered, running it through an old law enforcement database. Used to be part of a side project on police corruption reports. Minutes passed. Then the screen flashed. Match 89% confidence. Voice ID Detective Coral Briggs, CPD, retired. Rebecca's breath caught. That's him, she said. Zion looked at the name like it was a scar that finally had a shape. Briggs, he muttered. I remember that name. One of my foster homes had this plaque on the wall. Donated by Detective Carl Briggs. Same neighborhood where I first picked up the violin. The web was tightening. The next morning, Rebecca stood in front of a beige house, in a quiet suburb outside Chicago. The lawn was trimmed. A flag hung limp on the porch. Wind chimes tinkled just enough to sound peaceful. She knocked. A few moments later, the door opened to reveal a man in his 70s, tall, wide-shouldered gray hair swept back. He wore a white undershirt and sweatpants. His eyes scanned her carefully.
You're Langford, he said flatly.
She blinked. You know who I am? You've been asking questions, he said. People still talk. Rebecca swallowed. Can I come in? He hesitated, then stepped aside. The living room was sterile. No pictures. No warmth. just recliners and a TV set to mute. She sat across from him. I know you were the voice in the alley, she said plainly. He didn't react. You worked the South Side. You saw what happened to Johnny Lang. Still no response. He trusted people who told him to stay quiet. And you— I didn't kill him, Briggs interrupted. Rebecca leaned forward. But you helped them erase him. His eyes flickered. She slid the printed match across the table. He stared at it for a long time. Then finally, he spoke. He was arrested outside Club Mosaic in March 2008. Loitering, technically. They said he was acting erratic. Claimed he tried to force entry after hours. But we all knew that wasn't it. Rebecca waited. He was a white man playing to black crowds, sleeping with a black woman, making noise. That kind of thing didn't go unnoticed. She clenched her fists. So what happened? They processed him. Didn't book him in county. Just moved him.
Where?
I don't know, he said. They sealed the report, ordered me to scrub the file. Rebecca's voice cracked. Who gave the order? Briggs stared out the window. I didn't ask. People above my pay grade. Do you understand what you did? Briggs turned to her, something heavy behind his eyes. I was a cop in a city that didn't care what happened to people once they vanished from the docket. He was marked. I just held the pen. Rebecca stood, fury simmering. You stole a father, a partner, a life. I followed orders, he snapped. That's what we all did. She wanted to scream, but Zion's face flashed in her mind, and she swallowed the rage instead. Where did you move the violin case? She asked. Briggs paused, then reached into a drawer beside his chair. He pulled out a small brass key, held it between two fingers. I kept this, he said. Don't know why. Maybe guilt. Rebecca took it, her fingers brushing his. It was colder than she expected. You're telling me this now. Why? He stared at her. Because I've got more years behind me than ahead. And because maybe I want one thing I buried, to see daylight. Before she could respond, Zion stepped into the room. He'd been waiting outside, but the conversation had drawn him in. Briggs looked up and froze. Zion's eyes burned. That's him, Zion said quietly. That's the man who used to stand outside my mom's window. Briggs didn't speak. I remember your voice, Zion added. You were there the night she cried harder than I ever heard. You told her he wasn't coming back, and then you disappeared too. Briggs opened his mouth, but Zion shook his head. Don't say anything. Just know, I remember. Zion turned to Rebecca, holding the brass key in his palm. Whatever this opens, it's time we find it. The sky was the color of lead when they reached the edge of the city, where the skyline gave way to gravel lots and low-rise warehouses, and the past could live undisturbed. Zion had barely said a word since they left Carl Briggs's house. Rebecca didn't press. Some silences deserved respect. The storage facility was bleak. Rows of rusting roll-up doors, their paint chipped and peeling like old wounds. Barbed wire crowned the perimeter fence. A weather-beaten sign read, Chatham Lock and Store Est. They parked near the end of the row. Rebecca pulled the brass key from her pocket. It was heavier now, like it had absorbed the weight of everything they had learned. Zion stepped ahead, scanning the numbers until he stopped in front of Unit 9. The lock on the door was ancient, crusted in rust, but the key slid in with eerie ease. One twist, a sharp click. Rebecca hesitated.
You ready?
She asked. Zion looked straight at her, eyes steady. No, but let's do it anyway. They lifted the door together. It groaned as it rose, reluctant like it was guarding something sacred. Inside, the air smelled of dust, paper, and old wood. Light spilled from the open door, cutting across boxes stacked waist-high, and an old black trunk in the center. The walls were bare metal. The past had no insulation here. Rebecca took a cautious step inside. Zion followed, eyes darting, every breath louder than the silence. She opened the trunk first. Inside were handwritten letters, carefully bundled with string, yellowing newspaper clippings, sheet music, a few cassette tapes labeled in blue pen, Basement Sessions, 2007, and at the very bottom, a faded brown envelope with a single line written across it. To my son. Zion froze when he saw it. His hands shook slightly as he reached for it, holding it like something that might shatter. Do you want to be alone? Rebecca asked softly. He didn't answer. She gently took the envelope, peeled it open, and unfolded the letter inside. The paper was fragile, creased from years of waiting. Then, she read, Zion, If you're reading this, I didn't make it back to you. But don't let anyone tell you I didn't try. I fought. Not with fists. With music. With love. With hope. But the system wasn't built for men like me. White skin. Black family. Poor loud. I made noise they couldn't tune out. I wanted custody. I was told I'd never win. Not in a white court. Not with a black sun. Not in a city that thinks justice has a complexion. Zion swallowed hard. Rebecca continued. I planned to take you and your mother away. I bought bus tickets. Told Celeste to meet me on March, but they found me first. Told me to choose. If I disappeared, they'd leave you both alone. So I did. Not because I didn't love you. Because I loved you too much to let you grow up. Hunted. I left this for you because I knew the day would come when you'd need to know the truth. And I want you to hear me. Not just with your ears, with your heart. This song is yours. It always was. Rebecca opened the small cassette case attached to the letter and placed the final tape into the player they'd brought. The sound clicked to life. There was no introduction, just a violin. The same melody that had haunted them both. But this version was fuller, less broken. It rose and fell like breathing. No lyrics, just emotion in the rawest form. Pain and love, regret and hope, tangled in every note. Zion closed his eyes and cried. He didn't make a sound, but his chest heaved as the song played. A silent earthquake breaking through layers of time. Rebecca sat beside him, her own tears tracing a quiet path. When the final note faded, they sat in the stillness for what felt like an eternity. I was born to a man the world buried, Zion whispered, and a mother they erased. Rebecca turned to him. But you're here, playing, remembering. That's defiance. He nodded slowly. They turned their attention back to the trunk, lifting out one box at a time. Newspaper articles praised Johnny Lang's early gigs. A white jazz prodigy with soul beyond his years. Others were more sinister. Editorials condemning his performances in inappropriate neighborhoods. Thinly veiled attacks calling him a cultural interloper. There were personal notes, too. Scrawled chords, lyrics, even love letters, mostly unsigned, but undeniably written to Celeste. Zion picked up a sheet titled 4Z, with a scribbled phrase beneath it. He'll play what I couldn't say. He closed his eyes again. Then, at the bottom of the trunk, he found it. A thick, sealed envelope. Dark blue. No label, except for one line written in slanted cursive. Only open when ready to learn everything. Zion stared at it. His hand hovered, but didn't touch. Rebecca whispered, "Do you want to open it?" He shook his head. "Not yet." She nodded, understanding more than words could explain. Outside, the sky had shifted. The clouds parted slightly, letting through streaks of amber light as the sun tried to reclaim the day. Rebecca gently packed the letters and tapes back into the trunk, leaving the blue envelope aside. She could feel the tension in Zion's silence, not fear but readiness still ripening.
You okay?
She asked. "I don't know what's in there," he said, voice thin. "But I think it's going to change everything." As they closed the trunk, Rebecca's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number flashed across the screen. "He's not gone. He's waiting. The music will lead you." Zion held the thick blue envelope like it might ignite in his hands. The words "only open when ready to learn everything" still stared at him like a dare. He didn't speak, didn't blink. The air around him seemed to quiet, as if even the wind outside the storage unit waited. Rebecca sat beside him on the concrete floor, legs crossed, hands resting carefully on her lap. "You don't have to," she began. "I do," he interrupted softly. "I'm ready." He peeled the flap open slowly. Inside, 2 documents. One was a folded letter, the other, stapled behind it, was a single-page DNA test. Zion read the top line. Subject, Zion Avery Lang. Parental match, Jonathan Johnny Lang. His breath caught. He'd known it in his bones, in the melodies he played, in the ache that lived behind his ribs. But now, it was scientific. Documented. Irrefutable. He passed the sheet to Rebecca. She stared at the name Lang, her father's name, and beside it Zion's. But there was more. A second attachment, folded underneath. Rebecca opened it. Her hand trembled. It was another DNA report. Half-sibling match detected. Zion Avery Lang. Rebecca Ann Langford. 49. Rebecca froze. The world around her shrank to a pinpoint. She read the page again. And again. The lullaby. The music. The way Zion had looked at her that first morning. It wasn't coincidence. It wasn't just shared pain.
They shared blood.
She looked up. Zion. He didn't react right away. Then, slowly, his eyes found hers. What? He asked. Rebecca's voice broke. We're half-siblings. The words hung there. Impossible. Sacred. Unthinkable. No, Zion whispered.
No, that's... How?
She swallowed. My father, your father. He had a relationship with my mother before he met yours. Zion stood, pacing. She told me he left. Disappeared. Said he just couldn't handle being a dad. Rebecca shook her head. He didn't leave. He was forced out. Twice. Zion's voice cracked. So the man I was told was a ghost, was also your father, and he left both of us. No, she said gently. He didn't leave us. He was pushed out. The pieces collided. Johnny had tried to be there. Had tried to keep both families. But threats of racism, of scandal, of social exile drove him into silence, into hiding. Rebecca's phone buzzed again. Another message from that unknown number. Your mother knew. She made him choose. The words felt like an axe. She stood abruptly, pulled out her phone and dialed. Margaret Langford answered on the second ring. Rebecca, did you know? Her voice was ice. A pause, then a sigh. I always feared this day. Don't dodge the question. Did you know Zion is my brother? There was a long silence on the other end. I suspected. Years ago when Johnny didn't come home, and the rumors started, I pieced things together. But I chose not to confirm it. For your sake. Rebecca clenched her jaw. For my sake, or yours. Margaret's voice shifted. You don't understand how the world worked then. A white man with a black child? A scandal. I would have lost everything. So you let me grow up with half a father, and Zion grow up with none. I did what I thought was best, her mother said coldly. No, Rebecca whispered. You did what was easiest. She ended the call. Zion sat down again, head in his hands. I thought I was trash, he said, like I didn't come from anywhere. Turns out I was a son, a brother. Rebecca placed her hand over his. You always were. The world just worked overtime to convince you otherwise. The next morning brought clarity and chaos. Word had spread about Zion's performances. A video of him playing Johnny's composition on the sidewalk had gone viral, picked up by local media. His raw talent, the backstory, the connection to a long-lost jazz icon. By noon he received a call from an elite music scout affiliated with Juilliard. They wanted to offer him a full scholarship. Zion stood in the Langford Center's conference room, phone still in his hand, staring at Rebecca like he didn't trust his own ears. They said they'd fly me out, he said. Audition's just a formality. They've seen enough. That's incredible, Rebecca said, trying to smile. You deserve this. Zion nodded. But his expression stayed distant. There's one condition. She frowned. What is it? They want me to shut up, he said. No more interviews. No more digging. Just play violin. Let the story die. Rebecca's heart sank. They said that? They didn't say it outright, he replied. They said they prefer to align with narratives that foster institutional harmony, whatever the hell that means. She stepped closer. Zion, you don't owe anyone your silence. He looked away. But I do owe myself a future. You can have both. Not in this country, he said. Not when the truth is ugly and I look like the wrong part of it. She reached for him. Don't let them bury you like they buried him. His eyes met hers, torn, afraid, alive. I don't know what to choose. You don't have to choose today. But Zion was already walking away. The envelope still in his hands. The world already pulling him in two directions. That night, Zion sat alone in his apartment when a private message popped up on his phone. We know who you are. Juilliard won't protect you. Zion stared at his phone long after the screen went dark. We know who you are. Juilliard won't protect you. It didn't have a name, a sender, or even a reply option. Just a threat dressed like a whisper. He'd spent the whole night flipping the scholarship letter over and over in his hands, trying to understand how something so beautiful, so hard-earned, could suddenly feel like a leash. He had dreamed about Juilliard in silence, when the city drowned him out, when shelters passed him over, when other kids laughed at him for carrying a violin instead of a basketball. And now, when the door had finally opened, it came with a condition. Be quiet, be acceptable, be invisible. Zion sat by the window, the violin resting in his lap. His fingers moved across the strings in silence, not to play but to feel something real beneath his skin. Across town, Rebecca was sitting in the Langford Center boardroom, heart pounding under her blazer as she read the letters spread across the table. Effective immediately, your employment is terminated. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She just folded the paper, stood up and left. The footage had leaked. Her confrontation with Carl Briggs. The old man had retired, but his network hadn't. Somewhere between her questioning and the silent whispers that followed, someone had pushed a button. And her institution chose silence over disruption. By noon, news of her dismissal had spread online. Zion saw the headlines first. Nonprofit director fired amid rogue investigation into decades-old jazz scandal.
They made it sound reckless, selfish, even opportunistic.
He knew better. That night, he walked into the courtyard, outside the city's largest community arts center, ironically the same one that had once thrown him out, and took his place under the single lamplight near the fountain. There was no announcement, no event, just him. And the song, he didn't name it, didn't introduce it. He simply lifted the violin to his chin, closed his eyes, and played. The notes poured out like breath he'd been holding for years. Raw, unfiltered, a story without words. It was Johnny's composition, but altered now, layered with new phrasing, sharper tension, and aching pauses. It sounded like resistance, like love lost and almost found, like history refusing to be buried. People stopped, phones rose, eyes welled. Someone whispered, "That's Zion Lang, the one from the tapes." By the next morning, the video had millions of views. The man the world erased, played back into existence. Comment sections lit up with fury and reverence. Why did no one talk about this before? He's what America tried to erase. Half white, half black, fully forgotten. Until now, others were less kind. Why make this about race? Keep politics out of art. There's no proof the story is even real. And then the offers came.
Book publishers.
Media houses.
Streaming platforms. Everyone wanted Zion's story on one condition. Tone down the racial angle. Focus on the music. The tragedy, not the system. Rebecca read the emails over his shoulder. They want the pain, but not the reason. Zion closed the laptop. They want the poetry without the politics. She nodded. That's what they always want. Later that week, Rebecca's car tires were slashed. A folded note was left under her windshield wiper. Stay quiet. Before someone else disappears. She took it straight to the police. They told her there was no surveillance.
No prints.
No crime to investigate. Zion paced across her living room. Fists clenched. "They're still doing it," he said. "Still trying to silence us. Like back then." Rebecca stayed calm. "Then we stay louder." That evening, Zion received another letter. This one wasn't anonymous. It was from Juilliard. Formal, polite, strategic. Due to the increased media attention and socio-political controversy, the admissions board was reviewing the public messaging surrounding new offers. In other words, they were pulling back. Zion laughed bitterly. "They wanted my silence. Now they're punishing my sound." Rebecca said nothing. He looked at her, eyes hollow. "I don't know who to be anymore. The son of a ghost? The violin kid who plays for the dead?" "You're both," she said, "and more." He didn't reply, just play and play, until the note stopped meaning anything. Then the call came. Late at night, from the hospital. Celeste. She'd collapsed in her room, convulsing. Paramedics suspected poisoning, contaminated tea, maybe pills. There was no forced entry. No evidence. No suspects. But the message was clear. Someone was sending warnings. Zion dropped the phone mid-call. Rebecca caught it before it hit the floor. "What happened?" she asked. He didn't answer, just whispered, "She's not waking up." As Zion rushed toward the hospital, Rebecca received a second message. This time a video of Celeste's nursing room, with the violin playing softly in the background. The moment Zion stepped into the fluorescent hallway of Chicago General, time fractured. Nurses passed in slow motion. The intercom buzzed dimly in the background, but all he could hear was the violin. Not in his hands. Not in his head. In the video, sent anonymously to Rebecca's phone just minutes before. Celeste's hospital room, empty, still. A grainy view from what looked like a hallway camera, and through the door, barely audible but unmistakable, was Zion's song. The same melody Johnny composed. The same one Zion had played in public just days ago. Except he hadn't been there. Someone else had played it. Someone watching. Zion slammed through the ICU doors before security could react. Rebecca followed, breathless, holding her phone tightly like a live grenade. Celeste lay motionless in the hospital bed, hooked to machines that blinked and beeped like impatient alarms. Her skin looked pale, almost translucent. A nurse adjusted the IV drip, but offered no reassurance. "She's stable," the nurse said cautiously, "but sedated. Toxicology still pending." Zion stared. She drank tea from her usual mug. Rebecca nodded. "Same nurse on shift?" The nurse hesitated. "There was a sub that night. Agency temp. No ID found. Disappeared before the morning rounds." Zion's fists tightened. They weren't just erasing history. They were protecting its erasure. Word spread faster than they could contain it. By evening, headlines blared across social media. Jazz legend's widow poisoned amid racial cover-up scandal. Violin prodigy linked to cold case of missing white musician. City fails to protect witness in decades-old interracial suppression. By morning, crowds were gathering outside the hospital. And then the streets ignited. Zion didn't speak. He didn't need to. Others did it for him. His followers. His classmates. Musicians. Historians. Mothers. Students. They carried signs. Erased but not forgotten. Justice for Johnny Lang. Black Sound Matters. The protest began at the Langford Center, spilling into downtown, blocking traffic, drawing helicopters, and at the front, Zion, violin slung over his shoulder, like a battle flag. Rebecca walked beside him, silent, but fierce. The chants were rhythmic. Raw. "Say his name, Johnny Lang." She was silenced. "Celeste Harper. We won't be quiet so you can feel comfortable." News outlets scrambled. First local, then national. Every network wanted the story. Johnny Lang, once a promising jazz artist, vanished in 2008, under suspicious circumstances. Celeste Harper, a jazz singer, ostracized for loving a white man. Zion Lang, the violin prodigy who uncovered it all, born from a love the world refused to see. And Rebecca Langford, the daughter who grew up in white silence and now marched in black resistance. Then came the unexpected. A primetime news segment. Live. Margaret Langford, Rebecca's mother, sat across from the anchor, her pearls clasped tightly around her neck, her expression unreadable. She began cautiously. Scripted. "I was raised in a time when shame wore many disguises. Race, status, image. I buried truths I didn't have the courage to face. Then, suddenly, she broke from the teleprompter. And I lied to my daughter. I denied her a brother. I let a man vanish without fighting to understand why." The anchor blinked. Margaret continued. "We all talk about racial healing like it's a ceremony. But it's not. It's a confrontation. And sometimes, we need to confront the monsters in our mirrors." Rebecca watched from a hotel room, stunned. Zion was beside her, unmoved. "It doesn't change what she did," he said. "No," Rebecca whispered, "but it changes who hears it." Within hours, Juilliard released a formal statement. Due to ongoing disruption of institutional messaging and media interference, the scholarship extended to Mr. Zion Lang has been rescinded. They dressed it in corporate speak. But the truth was bare. Zion had become too loud. He was no longer a talent. He was a threat. The internet exploded. Zion's fan base tripled. Musicians began uploading covers of his melody. Kids in New Orleans, teens in Compton, girls in Baltimore, boys in Detroit, black children who had never touched a violin before, were now learning the song of a man the world had tried to forget. One cover stood out. A 12-year-old boy in a Bronx stairwell playing Zion's song on a borrowed violin. The caption read, "For the fathers they silenced. For the stories we never got to hear." Rebecca's inbox flooded. Educators, activists, filmmakers, people begging for the full story, the raw truth. Zion turned them all down. Until one email caught his attention. Not from a journalist, not from a musician, but from a lab. A private forensic DNA group working on a federal genealogy archive. The subject line was simple. "Match confirmed. John Lang. Active identity found." Zion stared at the email. Rebecca sat beside him, trembling. "It can't be." He opened the message, and there it was. A digital profile. Flagged through a volunteer ancestry database. Johnny Lang's DNA. uploaded from the storage unit letter had matched a living patient in a mental care facility in Michigan. Name on file, John Lewis. No family listed. Admitted in. Diagnosed with dissociative amnesia following traumatic head injury. Zion's voice cracked. He's alive. Rebecca's phone buzzed again, this time with a voicemail. A raspy voice whispered. He doesn't remember who he is, but he still plays the song. The drive to Michigan was quiet. Not in sound, but in spirit. Zion stared out the window. The DNA report clutched in his lap like a letter from a dead man, refusing to stay buried. Rebecca drove with both hands tight on the wheel, her gaze never leaving the road, though her mind drifted miles behind them. Neither of them knew what they would find at the end of the highway. The facility wasn't what they expected. No barbed wire, no looming iron gates, just a peaceful campus of red brick buildings, trees swaying gently in the wind, and a fountain in the courtyard that burbled like it belonged in a college quad. The sign out front read, Bright Pines Restorative Center. They signed in at the front desk, under clinical stares, and clipped politeness. The woman at the desk, a black nurse named Layla, lowered her voice when she saw the name on their visitor log.
You're here for John Lewis?
Zion and Rebecca nodded in unison. The nurse's gaze softened. He don't talk much, but he plays. Every afternoon in the common room. Same song, same time. Zion's throat tightened. He plays? Every day, she said. Doesn't remember where it came from. Doesn't even remember his own name. But when the bow hits those strings, it's like his soul's waking up. They were led down a long hallway filled with soft hums of wheelchairs and soft murmurs. Zion's heart raced with each step. The common room had windows on all sides. Sunlight streamed in like it had been waiting. And there in the corner sat a man, slim, slumped forward in his chair, violin resting gently in his lap, his hair now streaked with silver, curled at the edges like it had once been wild and untamed. His fingers, though thinner, moved with the same grace Zion had seen in the old performance photos. He lifted the bow and played. Zion froze. The sound, fractured, soft, and wary, was still his. That song, Zion's song, it wasn't perfect. Age had softened it. Trauma had dulled its clarity. But it was undeniably him. Rebecca's hand clutched Zion's wrist. Johnny Lang, now John Lewis, didn't notice them. His eyes stayed closed, lost in a melody older than his memory. When the final note faded, Johnny looked up. His eyes passed over them like clouds drifting past a mountaintop. No spark, no flicker, no recognition, just silence. Zion stepped forward. Johnny? The man tilted his head, puzzled. Rebecca tried. Dad? Still nothing. Then Johnny spoke, soft, cautious, disconnected. I'm sorry. I think you have the wrong man. Zion's chest tightened. You're not John Lewis. The man smiled gently. That's the name they gave me. The nurse entered, her voice low. He came to us in 2010, found wandering downtown. Head injury, no ID, no memory. State gave him the name. He's been here ever since. Zion could barely stand. Rebecca sat beside Johnny and reached into her bag. She pulled out an old Polaroid, the one with Johnny, Celeste, and baby Zion. She handed it to him. Johnny stared. For a long time. His lips parted. His fingers shook. I don't remember her, he whispered. But I remember this feeling. Zion blinked fast. What feeling? Like someone was waiting for me. Rebecca turned to the nurse. Can he recover? She hesitated. It's possible, but only if we help him remember slowly. Familiar sounds, faces, timelines. We've seen some patients come back in pieces. Zion stood up straight. Then we bring the pieces. From that day forward, they returned every morning. Rebecca built a timeline, photos pinned to a corkboard, labeled dates, concert posters, news articles, even old club flyers from the jazz era on the South Side. Zion played every day at. He didn't perform. He called. To the father who had been silenced. To the boy he had been before the world fractured. And day by day, something shifted. At first Johnny would hum along, unconscious, instinctual. Then he'd mumble words mid-melody. Celeste, or Don't Forget. He began tapping rhythms with his feet. One afternoon, as Zion played a slower version of the soul song, Johnny lifted his bow and joined, tentative, but present. The nurses watched from the doorway, tears in their eyes. One day Johnny sat back and whispered, "That song, it's his name, isn't it?" Zion froze. Yes. A long silence.
Then Johnny asked,
Is he here? Zion nodded. He's right in front of you. Johnny looked at him. Longer this time. Closer. And though the memories weren't back yet, something in his gaze no longer drifted past them. He was starting to see. Rebecca brought more tapes, videos, even the old violin case from the storage unit. Johnny traced its handle like it was a relic from another life. One afternoon, as Zion finished playing and wiped his eyes, Johnny stood slowly, wobbling slightly. He turned and said a single word, barely above a whisper, but it shattered every wall still standing. Zion. The boy stopped breathing for a moment. He stepped forward. Yes. Johnny's lips quivered. I remember the name. Zion's hands trembled. Do you remember me? Johnny reached out, placing a shaky hand on Zion's shoulder. I don't. Not yet. But you feel like music. I used to know. That night, a nurse slipped a sealed letter into Rebecca's hand. He wrote this last week, she said. Before he spoke your name, it's addressed to both of you, and it says don't open until the final song is played. The posters went up first, black and white, minimalist, bold red lettering across the top. For the father they tried to erase. A concert by Zion Lang, featuring a man finding his memory. Johnny Lang. At first it felt too risky. Rebecca questioned whether Johnny was ready, whether the world deserved his pain exposed under stage lights. But Zion had looked her straight in the eye and said, this isn't about performance. It's about resurrection. They chose a venue that meant something, an outdoor amphitheater, built on the ashes of Club Mosaic. The old jazz sanctuary had long since been replaced by a sterile park and vacant concrete. But for one night, its spirit would rise again. Johnny didn't speak much in the days leading up. He had lucid moments, brief flashes where he remembered Celesta's laugh, or the way his fingers used to bleed after hours of rehearsal. But mostly he sat quietly, listening to Zion rehearse in the sunlit corners of the facility. The staff prepared him gently for the evening. They told him there would be music. They didn't tell him the world would be watching. The night of the concert, the amphitheater filled early.
Students. Teachers.
Activists. Old jazz heads who remembered Johnny's name. New fans who only knew Zion's. Media trucks lined the outer lot. Live stream rigs were set up in every corner. Rebecca stood backstage, clutching the unopened letter Johnny had written, the one that said don't open until the final song is played. Her fingers wouldn't let go of it. Zion stood at the center of the stage, bow in hand, violin cradled like something alive. He looked to the side curtain, where two nurses gently wheeled Johnny toward the stage. The older man sat upright, eyes darting across the audience, face unreadable. As the applause died down, Zion leaned toward the mic. This is for the father I never knew, he said. The man the world tried to erase, and the man I met not through words but through sound. He turned, nodded, and began to play. The opening note was soft, hesitant. Then it grew. The melody wrapped around the audience like smoke, winding through memory and silence, pulling from corners of grief they didn't know were still alive. Johnny's fingers twitched, then lifted, then hovered over the strings. His bow rose, and met Zion's. The first note from Johnny cracked, shaky, fragile. The second, steadier. By the third they were playing in harmony. Rebecca gripped the curtain. Johnny closed his eyes, and played like he had never stopped. His fingers remembered what his mind couldn't. His soul filled the spaces where memory failed. The melody crescendoed, two voices blending across time. Pain and reunion. Silence and return. The crowd didn't cheer. Not yet. They wept. And when the last note echoed out into the night, Johnny lowered his violin, breathing heavily. Zion turned, slowly. Johnny's lips parted. His voice was raspy. I remember now, he said into the mic. They took my music, my voice, my life. The crowd erupted. Some cheered. Some screamed. Some just stood, stunned, hands over their hearts. Rebecca stepped onto the stage, tears streaming. Zion embraced Johnny, holding him close. Not as a performer, not even as a son, but as a man who had been waiting his entire life to be seen. The next morning, the internet broke. Clips of the concert dominated every feed. Father and son reunite through song after 17 years of silence. Johnny Lang reclaims his voice in one night. They tried to bury him. He played anyway. But not all the attention was warm. The backlash followed, too. Troll accounts mocked the concert as a liberal fantasy. Commenters said Johnny was being paraded like a racial guilt puppet. Some questioned Zion's story, calling it unprovable emotional manipulation. The hate was loud, but the support was louder. Juilliard faculty signed an open letter apologizing for the scholarship's rescindment. Dozens of music academies offered Zion honorary residencies. A movement had begun, young black musicians uploading their original compositions using the hashtag "They Tried to Erase Us." And amid it all, Zion stayed silent, processing the storm, protecting Johnny, playing only for the man who still pieced his memory together through melody. Backstage, Rebecca finally opened the envelope. Inside was a letter typed clean, deliberate. If you're reading this, it means I remembered something. And if I remembered something, then I want you to know.
I never meant to leave. I was scared, but not for myself, for you.
The music they tried to silence was ours, not just mine. So play it loud. Play it so they never forget what they tried to erase. That night, as the city pulsed with conversation, Zion's phone rang. Unknown number. He answered. A calm, professional voice spoke. Zion Lang? This is Maya Torres, creative director at One Glass Pictures. We'd like to talk to you about your story, your father, your music. We think the world's ready to see it on film. Zion blinked, stunned, then saw a second call coming in, this time from the facility nurse. Johnny disappeared this morning. We think he walked out. The posters went up first. Black and white minimalist bold red lettering across the top. For the father they tried to erase. A concert by Zion Lang, featuring a man finding his memory, Johnny Lang. At first it felt too risky. Rebecca questioned whether Johnny was ready, whether the world deserved his pain exposed under stage lights. But Zion had looked her straight in the eye and said, "This isn't about performance, it's about resurrection." They chose a venue that meant something. An outdoor amphitheater built on the ashes of Club Mosaic. The old jazz sanctuary had long since been replaced by a sterile park and vacant concrete. But for one night, its spirit would rise again. Johnny didn't speak much in the days leading up. He had lucid moments, brief flashes where he remembered Celeste's laugh, or the way his fingers used to bleed after hours of rehearsal. But mostly, he sat quietly, listening to Zion rehearse in the sunlit corners of the facility. The staff prepared him gently for the evening. They told him there would be music. They didn't tell him the world would be watching. The night of the concert, the amphitheater filled early. Students, teachers, activists, old jazz heads who remembered Johnny's name, new fans who only knew Zion's. Media trucks lined the outer lot. Livestream rigs were set up in every corner. Rebecca stood backstage, clutching the unopened letter Johnny had written. The one that said, "Don't open until the final song is played." Her fingers wouldn't let go of it. Zion stood at the center of the stage, bow in hand, violin cradled like something alive. He looked to the side curtain, where two nurses gently wheeled Johnny toward the stage. The older man sat upright, eyes darting across the audience, face unreadable. As the applause died down, Zion leaned toward the mic. "This is for the father I never knew," he said. "The man the world tried to erase. And the man I met, not through words but through sound." He turned, nodded, and began to play. The opening note was soft, hesitant. Then it grew. The melody wrapped around the audience like smoke, winding through memory and silence, pulling from corners of grief they didn't know were still alive. Johnny's fingers twitched, then lifted, then hovered over the strings. His bow rose and met Zion's. The first note from Johnny cracked, shaky, fragile. The second, steadier. By the third, they were playing in harmony. Rebecca gripped the curtain. Johnny closed his eyes and played like he had never stopped. His fingers remembered what his mind couldn't. His soul filled the spaces where memory failed. The melody crescendoed, two voices blending across time, pain and reunion, silence and return. The crowd didn't cheer.
Not yet.
They wept. And when the last note echoed out into the night, Johnny lowered his violin, breathing heavily. Zion turned, slowly. Johnny's lips parted. His voice was raspy. "I remember now," he said into the mic. "They took my music, my voice, my life." The crowd erupted. Some cheered. Some screamed. Some just stood, stunned, hands over their hearts. Rebecca stepped onto the stage, tears streaming. Zion embraced Johnny, holding him close. Not as a performer, not even as a son, but as a man who had been waiting his entire life to be seen. The next morning, The internet broke. Clips of the concert dominated every feed. Father and son reunite through song after 17 years of silence. Johnny Lang reclaims his voice in one night. They tried to bury him. He played anyway, but not all the attention was warm. The backlash followed too. Troll accounts mocked the concert as a liberal fantasy. Commenters said Johnny was being paraded like a racial guilt puppet. Some questioned Zion's story, calling it unprovable emotional manipulation. The hate was loud, but the support was louder. Juilliard faculty signed an open letter apologizing for the scholarship's rescindment. Dozens of music academies offered Zion honorary residencies. A movement had begun. Young black musicians, uploading their original compositions using the hashtag, "They tried to erase us." And amid it all, Zion stayed silent, processing the storm, protecting Johnny, playing only for the man who still pieced his memory together through melody. Backstage, Rebecca finally opened the envelope. Inside was a letter typed, clean, deliberate. "If you're reading this, it means I remembered something. And if I remembered something, then I want you to know. I never meant to leave. I was scared, but not for myself, for you." The music they tried to silence was ours, not just mine. So play it loud. Play it so they never forget what they tried to erase. That night, as the city pulsed with conversation, Zion's phone rang. "Unknown number," he answered. A calm, professional voice spoke. "Zion Lang, this is Maya Torres, creative director at One Glass Pictures. We'd like to talk to you about your story, your father, your music. We think the world's ready to see it on film." Zion blinked, stunned, then saw a second call coming in, this time from the facility nurse. "Johnny disappeared this morning. We think." He walked out. The story had begun in an alley, beneath the chill of a December sky and the hiss of a distant bakery vent. But now it was everywhere. Zion Lang, once mistaken for a stray note in society's score, was now a national icon. Not just a prodigy, not just a symbol, but a voice too loud to ignore. He didn't ask to lead a movement, but music made space where the world had tried to close every door. Every interview he gave was careful, but unsparing. He didn't water down the past for public comfort. He named names. He spoke of Johnny Lang not as a mythical figure, but a father wounded by institutions that punished love across color lines. He spoke of Celeste Harper, erased by the same hands. He spoke of the street corners where kids learned silence instead of scale. At a symposium at the Kennedy Center, he stood before an audience of critics, scholars, and politicians. "I don't play to entertain," he said. "I play to remember, and to remind." His violin became both instrument and indictment. Rebecca, watching from the wings, knew the full cost of that transformation. She had watched him lose scholarships, security, and silence. But in return, he had gained a purpose that reached across generations. She built her own tribute. The Half Note Foundation, a nonprofit serving biracial and multiracial youth navigating identity, history, and institutional invisibility. Named in honor of Johnny, it became a haven for stories that didn't fit neatly into checkboxes. The foundation funded therapy, music education, community events, and every child who walked through the door was given a blank journal and a violin case if they wanted one. The tagline was simple: "You belong here." Then came the premiere. The film adaptation of Zion's story, Forgotten Chord, debuted at the Tribeca Film Festival. The red carpet was lined with flashbulbs and microphones, but Zion arrived in a modest black suit, bow tie askew, violin case in hand. Inside the theater, the audience sat in stunned silence as the final scene played. Zion and Johnny reunited on stage, bow meeting bow, harmony restoring history. When the lights rose, no one clapped at first. Then the standing ovation began. One critic called it the most painful and poetic story of modern America. Another wrote, "It's not just about music, it's about the silence that swallows love, and the notes that scream it back." That night, Johnny sat beside Zion at the after-party, sipping tea, eyes glassy with emotion he couldn't name. "I don't remember it all," Johnny said softly. "You don't have to," Zion replied. "You lived it." Johnny's health declined quickly after that. The years of suppression, both medical and emotional, had taken their toll. There were days he forgot where he was, but there was one thing he never forgot: the music. Even in hospice, when names faded and faces blurred, he would tap out rhythms against his blanket. Sometimes, the nurses found him humming quietly, eyes closed, bowing phantom notes in the air. One evening, Zion was asked to perform at Carnegie Hall. He'd dreamed about it once, when he was a boy with calloused fingers and frostbitten toes. But now the dream felt bittersweet. He didn't want to stand in that golden hall without Johnny. But Johnny insisted. "I want to hear you where they tried to keep you out," he said. "And I want to go while you're still playing for me." Zion performed with the world watching.
No prelude.
Just a single spotlight, a bow and his father's melody. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't perfect. It was honest. As the final note faded, the camera cut to the private room backstage, where Johnny sat, watching the live stream on a tablet, tears streaking down his cheeks. He smiled, then closed his eyes, and never opened them again. Zion didn't stop playing. Not that night. Not the next. He played through grief, through silence, through interviews that asked shallow questions, and audiences that didn't understand the stakes. He played because the story wasn't his anymore. It belonged to every child who had been told to shrink, every father who'd been disappeared, every melody that had died in someone's throat. Racism didn't vanish. Comments still poured in online, dissecting his tone, questioning his motives, demanding he stick to the music. But Zion knew better now. The music was the message. He stood on college stages, neighborhood porches, prison rec rooms, and every time he played Zion's song last, the melody had become more than a tribute. It was a call, a reclamation, a lighthouse. Years passed. Rebecca aged gracefully, her silver-streaked curls pulled back in a soft bun as she sat on panels, gave talks, wrote editorials. She no longer had to explain Zion to people. Now people asked her how to find the next one. She always said the same thing. Don't look for a prodigy. Look for the kid you ignored yesterday. On a warm spring afternoon in Harlem, a girl stood on the corner of Malcolm X Boulevard, just outside a crowded bodega. She was small, maybe 9 or 10, dark-skinned, eyes bright beneath a blue hoodie, 2 sizes too big. She held a violin under her chin. The first note she played was thin. The second, clearer. The third, recognizable. A man walking by paused. He knew that melody, Zion's song. The girl kept playing, oblivious to the growing crowd. A woman approached gently. "Where'd you learn that, sweetie?" The girl smiled. "Still playing. My daddy taught me." She didn't say Zion's name. She didn't have to, because the music had already answered. In the crowd, a stranger pulled out a phone, capturing the girl's performance, and just behind her, leaning against the bodega wall, partially hidden beneath a worn gray cap, was Johnny Lang. The news that Johnny Lang had vanished again sent shockwaves through the city. But this time, it wasn't a disappearance driven by fear or suppression. The facility's cameras showed him leaving calmly just before dawn, dressed in a donated overcoat, violin case in hand, humming softly as he stepped through the gates and into the morning fog. No one stopped him. No one had the heart to. He left behind a note on his bedside table, handwritten in jagged lines. "I came back once already. But the music will carry me further than memory ever could. Don't chase me, just keep playing." Zion didn't cry. He understood now. His father hadn't run away. He had simply chosen to become a song untraceable, unshackled, and immortal. The world changed quickly in the months that followed. The film deal moved fast. Maya Torres and One Glass Pictures turned Zion's story into a screenplay that sparked bidding wars. Production began with input from historians, musicians, and community leaders. But Zion made one thing clear. This won't be a tragedy. It'll be a resistance. Rebecca, now an acclaimed author, released her memoir. 2 notes, 1 father. A dual perspective on privilege, silence, and the redemption that comes from listening harder. The book topped bestseller lists and was included in college syllabi across the country. And Zion? He built a home out of music. In a once-abandoned arts building near the South Side, he opened the Johnny Lang Music Academy, a sanctuary for underserved youth. No auditions, no fees, no silence. The motto above the doorway read, "If they can't hear you, play louder." Children of all backgrounds filled its halls, holding violins like lifelines, composing songs of grief and identity, and joy. The walls pulsed with rhythms from every corner of the country, and every student, whether they knew Johnny's name or not, learned one piece first: Zion's song. The tune that began on a street corner, played by a boy the world overlooked, now echoed in concert halls and cafeterias, bedrooms and school gyms. Montages flooded social feeds. A 7-year-old girl in Memphis violin case strapped to her back, playing on a sidewalk while her mother sold fruit beside her. 2 teen brothers in Oakland practicing Zion's song in their garage, the elder using coat hangers for a music stand. A classroom in Atlanta, where an all-black string quartet performed the piece in front of a stunned audience of white administrators. A choir in Newark that set lyrics to the instrumental, turning it into a protest anthem. The movement had no name, but everyone felt it. In Los Angeles, a mural appeared overnight, Zion and Johnny back-to-back, bows raised, sheet music floating between them like leaves caught in wind. Across the bottom, the word, "You can silence the man, but not the melody." Rebecca watched it all unfold with quiet awe. Her face rarely appeared on camera anymore. She preferred to let Zion take the stage, but her voice lived in every foreword she wrote, every preface in the schoolbooks where the story was taught, every time a teacher asked, "What does it mean to remember through music?" The story had reached classrooms. Progressive schools across the country added the Johnny Lang case to their history and arts curriculum, studying it not as isolated tragedy, but as systemic evidence, as both trauma and triumph. And though backlash came protests, boycotts, parents complaining that the story was too political, the violins never stopped. Zion became more than a musician. He became a movement. But amid the headlines and awards, he never forgot where it started. Not on a stage, not in a facility, but in an alley, behind a bakery, with nothing but cold air, torn shoes, and a song he didn't understand yet. He often walked that block at night, the same sidewalk where he first met Rebecca. She rarely let him go alone anymore. They didn't talk much on those walks, but their silence was different now. Warm, unbreakable. One autumn afternoon, a child stood on that same corner. She was maybe 10, thin, afro puffed wide under a knit beanie. A second-hand violin, clutched in her arm. She played softly, just a fragment of a tune. The opening of Zion's song. Rebecca spotted her first. They were walking home from a community board meeting, papers still in Zion's hands. The girl played shyly, eyes lowered, unaware of who was listening, until Zion stepped forward and sat beside her on the curb. He didn't say a word, just unpacked his violin and joined. The melody grew like it always had, from silence to something louder, from pain to presence. A small crowd gathered, not because someone famous was playing, but because the music asked them to stop, to listen, to remember. Rebecca stood at a distance, hand over her heart. And in that moment, watching a boy who'd once played to no one now, harmonize with a child who'd been born long after the violence, she understood. This wasn't just redemption, it was reincarnation. Society might forget voices. It might bury stories beneath policy and protocol, shame and silence. But music? Music remembers. It carries names across generations. It stitches broken bloodlines into harmony. It lifts what systems try to sink. As the final note hung in the air, Zion looked up at Rebecca. He smiled faintly, not because it was over, but because it would never be. She thought he was just a street kid. Turns out he was the missing half of her soul. No one should have to prove their worth just to be treated with dignity. If this story made you feel something, if it reminded you how broken the system still is,